Welcome to the Bird Artist Cottage. Hi, I'm Tara Kate. I'm a bird artist and illustrator, and happy Birdtober. In case you're not familiar with it, October is also Birdtober. Birdtober is a month-long drawing, painting, art making challenge for those of us who love to draw and paint and make art about birds. There are 31 prompts, one for every day of the month. They're all different species, and it is such a fun month to sharpen your skills, explore species you may have never seen or heard of before, and just have lots and lots of fun drawing birds. I am very excited about Birdtober this year. And in today's episode, I'm going to be bringing you lots of Birdtober friendly content. I'm going to start with a little guided tour of the species on the prompt list, and we're going to look at some photo reference. And I'm also going to share with you my photo reference stash, which is entirely available for you to download. And the link for that will be in the description below as well. I've also got a tutorial for you in this episode. I'm going to be giving you a tutorial on drawing bird feet. A lot of artists are really intimidated by drawing feet. Even very accomplished artists often struggle with bird feet. I was taking a Domestica class quite recently with a very accomplished and quite well-known illustrator. And I was very surprised when he got to the feet on the bird that he was drawing, and he just sort of punted. It seemed like he just kind of quit drawing them from the photo reference and drew these weird, very odd looking feet. So it can happen to anyone. And I want to give you some tips and tricks and just some experience with drawing feet that might help increase your confidence and help you to draw more realistic feet and just enjoy drawing bird feet more. I really actually enjoy drawing bird feet quite a lot. I think part of it because of there's all this challenge of different angles and foreshortening, and the more I've done it and the better I've gotten at it, I found that it's really helped me in other areas of my drawing. So I'm looking forward to sharing that content with you. Before we get started though, I'd like to invite you to my class, Drawing Birds for Beginners. If you're new at drawing, and even if you're a skilled artist, you will learn a lot about drawing birds from this class. And I share in it with you how I draw both from measuring angles and distances by sight, as well as using the proportional divider. I share with you mark making and all the techniques that I normally use when I'm drawing birds in pencil. I also have a lesson about curation and preservation for you, and that is particularly helpful during this month of Birdtober if you're producing a lot of art, that you understand and think about how to curate and preserve your work, because as you grow as an artist, you're really going to want that information later on. So I hope that you'll join me. There are two ways to enroll in the class. One is that you can buy the course as a standalone on Thinkific, and of course the link is in the description below. Or the more economical way is to join me on Patreon. The class is free for all tiers. And good news, Patreon is now on subscription billing, so it doesn't matter what time of the month you decide to join, you will be billed on your anniversary date every month instead of getting billed on the first of the month. So if you were to watch this video in mid-October and decide yes you wanted to join, then you would be billed on whatever date you join and billed that date thereafter, instead of getting billed again on the first of the month. So that's really great news. I'm so glad that Patreon finally got around to giving us subscription billing as an option for our patrons. Depending upon what tier you were to join at, you will get a really well-stocked library of drawing content. Certainly at the Happy Larks level is where you'll get the most content. There are numerous tutorials on drawing and painting birds, as well as 8 sketchbook tours, many updates on the illustrations for the book that I'm working on, and much more. So I hope you'll consider joining me over there on Patreon to get Drawing Birds for Beginners and a lot more. All right, Let's get started on today's content and take a look at the prompts for Birdtober. So this is your guided tour of all of the species on the Birdtober 2022 prompt list. And as I mentioned in the introduction, all of these photo references are available on my blog, and you can feel free to download these and use them as you like. So the first prompt was for rooster, and I chose red jungle fowl for that one. The second bird is a campo flicker. This is a Brazilian woodpecker species. I really quite like this pose. This is a female, by the way, but I really love the color, all of that wonderful markings on the body. So that's going to be a really fun one to draw. Kind of had trouble finding good photo reference of the macaroni penguin, in part because it's hard to see those wonderful red eyes, but I like this look of looking straight toward the bird's bill. Love this little pose of this Anna's hummingbird on her nest. I think that's going to be a fun one to draw. I did include several flying birds. The prompt here was just swan, and I chose tundra swan. Zebra finch, secretary bird, love this face-on view of this wonderful bird. These are fabulous birds. I did get to see these in Africa many years ago, and they are so cool. Sun conure, again, a nice face view. Thought this would make a really nice portrait. Razorbill, these birds are black and white, and they're, at least on Wikimedia Commons, the poses were kind of limited. I ended up choosing this one. Yeah, this is probably my least favorite photo in the whole lot. Pileated woodpecker, went with this head view so we can really get that fabulous hairdo. Saffron finch, for this one I plan to just draw the bird in front, the one holding that twig or whatever it is that it's got in its bill. I just thought that was a really neat pose. Black drongo, really, there were several really good photos on Wikimedia Commons. I ended up choosing this one because I really wanted to emphasize that fabulous red eye, but if you start looking around, you'll find that they have wonderful tail feathers, so there are a lot of good options for black drongo. Turtle dove, I went with this close-up face view so that I could get the eye and just the markings there on the neck. Philippine eagle, I tried to download the largest, highest resolution photos that I could get my hands on. This one was small, but wow, what a great bird, and those eyes are so soulful. Then the prompt on day 15 was just avocet, and I chose a red-necked avocet from Australia as a flying bird. Then I believe this was just lapwing, and I chose northern lapwing. Really like this walking pose. Makes the bird look a little bit more dynamic. Now, Spix's macaw is kind of a special species, and I chose to go with this museum specimen because this bird is extinct in the wild, and so there are some captive bird photos, but not very many, and certainly no photos of this bird in the wild anymore. And I felt that it was kind of a provocative way to draw this species, so that's why I chose the museum specimen here. For snow bunting, I went ahead and chose this wonderful photo, even though it's not perfectly in focus. There's just so many different poses. I undoubtedly will not draw every single bird here, but I thought it would be fun to draw a group of birds and to really focus on all that value contrast that you can see here. For the cockatoo, I chose the red-tailed black cockatoo and went with this profile pose of the head, and you really can't see the bill, but this is very expressive. They're cool birds. Cerulean warbler, this is a rather kind of typical profile view. I don't often draw birds in profile, but this was such a pretty bird. Nice look at the feet, by the way, if you want to practice your feet drawing on this particular photograph. It's got very nice photo of the feet. Kakapo is a flightless parrot that lives in New Zealand, and I really liked this photo. It feels very intimate, and I really like the eyes on this one, so I think this one will be a fun one to draw. Lovebird was another one that was listed as just a generic lovebird, so I chose rosy-faced lovebird. These are sometimes also called peach-faced lovebirds. I used to have a peach-faced lovebird. Her name was Precious, and I got her as a rescue bird, and she could say two things: ow and stop it. So that tells you a lot about Precious. Here is Eurasian Jade, day number 23, and I chose this flying pose in part because I really like this wing. I think this will be a fun one to draw. Then this lovely male bullfinch on day 24. Yellow-crowned night heron. I wasn't super thrilled with the various choices on yellow-crowned night heron. I've drawn that bird recently from photographs that I found elsewhere, but that are not free to use. So I didn't feel comfortable putting it here, that particular photo. So I chose this profile pic, and I think this is nice. This will be a good one to draw. I would have really liked to have this bill turned a lot more toward the viewer to get the foreshortening of the bill, because it's kind of cool looking, but I couldn't find one that I liked. Common myna here flying with the really, really nice wing pattern. That'll be a great one to draw. Here's golden oriole. Fabulous, colorful bird. I had not seen this bird before and have not drawn it before, so that'll be fun. This is a species that I had never heard of before, white-browed tit warbler, and to be honest, I do not remember where these birds are from. I chose the butt view on this bird. I like drawing bird butts, and I like drawing the bills foreshortened, moving away with the head turned away from the viewer. I really enjoy this kind of drawing, so that's why I chose that. And besides, it's got this fabulous lavender feathering there underneath the wings on the rear end. So cute bird. I think that'll be a fun one. For artist choice, I went with shoebill and went with this view where you can really see the bill and the eyes. So expressive. I really like this a lot. And with Egyptian vulture, similar foreshortened view. This bird is a funky looking bird, great hairdo, very expressive looking face. I think this will be a fun one to draw. And then the very last bird on the prompt list is barn owl, and I went with a flying barn owl flying toward the viewer with this nice look of the wings in perspective. And I think this one will be quite fun to draw. I think one of the things that's interesting about this pose too is how small the feet and legs look in this pose. So that's another kind of fun aspect of this drawing. Thought it would be kind of a different look. As you can see there, the image sources are available as a PDF download if you want all of the URLs for all of these images, and they're all free to use. They're all from either Wikimedia Commons or Unsplash, so all free for you to use, free for your download, and the link to this post is in the description below. Hope you enjoy Birdtober. Looking forward to seeing what you draw. So in today's tutorial, I'd like to cover some of the basic structure and anatomy of bird feet. And I think it's really helpful to study this kind of thing because it really makes such a huge difference when we start looking at photo reference. And as bird artists, I think most of us are very dependent on photo reference. You may have access to specimens. Occasionally I have access to specimens, and in fact you're going to see a specimen in this tutorial, but most of us are drawing from photos. And as you already probably realize, photography really flattens out images. And if you really understand how bird feet are put together, you can get past a lot of those difficulties. I'm also going to review with you some of the common positions and poses that you will see feet in. For this tutorial, I'm only going to be using passerine bird feet. So we're going to be looking at a mourning dove. Passerines are perching birds. It's a very common type of bird that you would see and perhaps be drawing. So let's take a look at some photo reference, and let's start with a bird standing on a flat surface. By the way, the software that I'm using is an app called VizRef. I'm using it on my iPad. I don't know if it is available for other operating systems, but it is a really, really handy and very powerful way to gather up photo reference and work with photo reference while you're drawing. So let's start with this bird here standing on a flat surface. This bird appears to be standing on a sandy beach. And I'm going to zoom right in on the feet, and look at some of the aspects of the passerine foot that you want to make notice of. First, you'll notice that the bird has 4 toes, 3 that face forward and 1 that faces backward. The tarsus, that is the leg, is angled. On the viewer's left, the bird's right foot, you can really see how strongly angled this tarsus is. You'll also notice that these toes are splayed and that they are of differing lengths. The middle toe is the longest toe almost always on passerine birds, and the 2 side toes, front toes, are somewhat shorter. And so this gives us some interesting challenges even when drawing a bird when you can actually see all the toes as you can in this particular pose. Let's now turn to a side view on this specimen that I was able to photograph and talk about some more of the aspects of the foot and get a closer look at the structure of the foot. So this is a relaxed foot because this bird was no longer alive. And you can very clearly see the scutes and scales, especially on the drawing. There are prominent pads on the toe tips, and I bring that to your attention because those turn out to be very helpful when we're drawing the feet, to look for those prominent pads and use those as ways to create a very natural looking foot. I also want you to notice that the toenails originate at the dorsal, that is the upper surface of the foot. So they're not coming out of the middle of the foot, or the toe rather, they're coming out of the upper part of the dorsal surface. If we now look at the front view of this specimen, here I rested the bird's foot on a pencil to give us a really good look at these foreshortened toes. And this is actually a rather typical way of seeing the foot when a bird is perched on a branch, although in that case there would be more bend to the toes as the bird would be gripping the perch. Although they don't often grip the perch tightly, they're usually more balanced on the perch, but you do see more of a bend in the toes in a bird that's alive, obviously. So we've got a very relaxed foot here. But this does show us the nails and the toe pads in perspective. And I want you to look very closely at how the scutes really help to describe the volume as cross contour lines. This is one of the things that I have found extremely helpful in drawing feet, is really paying attention to how the scutes and scales really give us that round line that shows us exactly how this thing is moving in space and really helps to envision volume. By the way, I want to also mention that all of these photos will be available for download on my Patreon, so that you can download these photos, especially of the specimens that you might find helpful for practice. So now let's look at some common foot positions and just go over some of the things about drawing birds in these common feet positions. And let's start with this bird that's perched here on a pine branch and zoom in on just the foot. You can see that the tarsus is angled relative to the body. In this particular position, most of the toes are obscured because the bird is in profile, but we can see that hind toe very clearly, and we can see one of the side toes. You can kind of see the other 2 toes hiding behind that side toe. I want you to also notice at how that front toe sort of flows out of the tarsus, that there's this beautiful, almost rhythmic flow of the way that line comes from the angle of the tarsus and then drops off into the toe itself. And you can also see how quite relaxed this bird's toe is. This bird is not very tightly gripping this perch at all. And in fact, one of the ways you can tell that is that the nail on the hind toe is not contacting the perch. So this bird is not grabbing the perch very tightly. And if you start to really observe bird feet in a lot of photography, what you'll see is that birds are typically balancing on a perch, and they're using their toes to kind of slightly grip the perch, but they're not just grinding. They're not white knuckling their feet down into a perch. About the only time that I see birds really grip the perch tightly is when the bird is agitated, maybe frightened or startled, or is about to take flight. Sometimes they will grip a little bit more tightly as they do this little squat down before they push off very strongly as they're launching themselves into the air. But generally, birds are not gripping their toes very tightly on whatever it is they're standing on if they're relaxed. The last thing I'd like to mention about this photograph is note that the perch itself is arched and it's actually moving toward us, the viewer. So this bird is not perched in a perfectly perpendicular pose on this perch, so it's not a perfect cross section. That's why the toes are kind of draped across the perch in the way that you're seeing in this photo. Now let's look at another perched bird. And this is another very typical pose that you might see birds in that's kind of a three-quarter view. And if we zoom in on the feet here, one of the first things that jumps out is how prominent these scutes and scales are on these feet. And the second thing that I really notice is the nice angle that the toes are forming. Again, you see that this bird is not gripping the perch very tightly. You can see that the middle toes particularly are very relaxed looking. You can see a hind toe there on the bird's right foot on your left that's peeking out from the underside of the branch, and that's often in a lot of photographs that we're working from. That's going to be what you see of the hind toe. You're going to either see the tip of the toe with that very prominent pad that I mentioned and the nail, or sometimes just the nail, as you do on the right side of the photo here. It's very subtle. You have to kind of look for it, but that right toenail, that bird's left foot's toenail, is actually visible on the underside of that perch. The tarsi on this bird are completely hidden, so you can't really see this bird's legs, kind of a little bit on the bird's right foot, but certainly not at all on the left. But if you look carefully, you can tell that these must be angled because of the way the bird's legs are sort of tucked up underneath it. That the angles of the toes as the joints form these angles as the bird grips the perch. Those angles are part of what's really important, I think, in getting a realistic looking foot as you're drawing the foot. And then last, I want to show you a bird that is standing on an unusual perch. And this bird is standing on, I think this is probably something that's holding up a bird feeder, but it's this split perch, like it's standing on two different branches. And there are several things I want you to notice about this. One is that the feet are somewhat out of focus, and that's very common in bird photography. But the real thing to notice here is how many different angles and positions that feet can take on, even in one photograph, where you've got everything from something that where toes look kind of fairly normal to a toe that is sticking straight up on the one that we're looking at on the right. This toe is in profile and it's kind of sticking up. The middle toe on that same foot has got this very odd angle to it, and it's foreshortened. If we're looking at the bird's right foot on our left, you can see that the toes are assuming all sorts of unusual positions. And what I want you to understand is that birds' feet are very flexible, and they're almost double jointed in a way that their feet and toes, their toes can kind of bend back and assume kind of odd positions. So don't be alarmed if you see something that looks quite weird. And also, as you get more confident in drawing feet, you'll be able to compensate for that if you don't like the position the toes are in. For example, if I was drawing this particular bird, I would probably reposition that middle toe on the bird's left foot, the one that's on our right, just because that angle is so odd looking. And I don't think it's particularly pleasant to look at. I probably would reposition that toe in my drawing. And so that's one of the reasons to study, is that it gives you the flexibility to respond to the photo reference in that way and compensate for it. That you found that tutorial helpful. I know that it took me a long time to start to get comfortable with drawing bird feet, and I still struggle at times. They are complex and challenging shapes to deal with, and foreshortening and all kinds of things that really give us a special challenges as artists. But wow, it feels really good when I really feel like I've created an image that really shows the feet in a way that feels realistic but yet still has an artistic flair. I'm especially enjoying drawing cross-hatching and cross-contour on a lot of the feet I'm doing in the illustrations I'm doing for the book. So I'm getting lots of practice, as you might imagine. I do hope that you will enjoy the month of Birdtober. If you'd like some tips and thoughts about how to get through these long daily challenges, like a 31-day challenge or even a 100-day project, check out this video. Thanks for stopping by. See you again next time. Bye now.